control. I want to do a review of what we did on Tuesday. We did like a lapel sequence, which I think is a very strong offensive option. So we'll do a quick review of that, and I promise I'll leave more time for specific because Tuesday I talked a lot. Nabil, I'll use you today. So we're gonna work an attacking sequence, feeding our partner's lapel out from under them, inside control. This way here, whatever direction it's up to. Okay, so when I'm inside control, why I might choose to take the time to feed the lapel out. One, I think it offers a little bit more control, but maybe Nabil just has like really good frames, and if I give any space to try and go knee on belly, he might get his guard back. So while I'm holding him down, I could even be in like my sniper position, my legs sprawled, just being really heavy, holding him here. I'm going to use my underhook arm to slowly start to feed the lapel. You'll feel like you're able to do this and not have to hold the underhook the whole time, the stronger your crossface is. So if I'm here and I want to add more pressure, I'm going to lift his shoulder up, reach deep with my crossface, and my fingers go into the armpit of the lat, and I'm going to use that grip to like pull Nabil to me so I can use my shoulder to turn his chin. And I'm doing this by like pulling my arm rather than like leaning too far forward on my toes. Now that I have a good crossface and shoulder pressure and he's facing away from me, now I have the luxury of control and time to slowly start feeding out the lapel. Notice how I grab the slack on the side first. Don't lift your weight off of him to try and grab the actual lapel itself. I just slowly start to feed the slack out until I can find the tail of the lapel here. And even when I have this too, like I want to get as much slack out and as much material as possible. His weight's on the back of the gi, so I can even start pulling out from under him, taking my time to loosen up the gi as much as I can. Now our first pass off is going to be passing from my underhook hand underneath his arm to my crossface arm here. And once I grab this grip, palm down, knuckles up, it kind of changes how I'm going to add my shoulder pressure now. It allows me to lean a little bit more, and actually the more I put pressure, it's going to be from straightening my arm rather than using my shoulder. So with the traditional crossface, I have to be kind of tight to him using my shoulder. But now I have the luxury of the lapel that if he pushes me away, I just straighten my arm. You see how that actually turns his face now, rather than me having to be so tight with my crossface. Okay. So this was our first pass off. Even if you don't want to use this to submit, this is still a great option just to add a little bit more control to your side control. And it frees up the ability of my right arm to move as needed. So once I have this control, I'm going to extend the arm away here. And now I'm going to start to continue my progress to basically, not necessarily knee on belly, but I want to trap Nabil's second arm here. I would like to be able to easily staple this arm to the floor, but if I don't feel like I can do that, here's a good frame, I'm probably going to go knee on belly first. So I'll lean to my right, use my right forearm on his hip, and then now I can start to go knee on belly, double knee on belly very briefly, so I can scrape down his arm here. Okay. Now that his arm's pinned, think about the control I have. Nabil can't turn away from me because I'm stapling his arm, and then if he turns into me, I can just straighten my crossface, and that'll also stop him. So he's very stuck here. You don't have to stay knee on belly. From here, I actually prefer to go down again so I'm not as tall. And I'm going to do one more pass off now. So I'm going to pass the crossface grip back to this hand, but on this side of his head. So I'm going kind of like for a cross choke grip here. So this guy's going palm up, grabbing that same lapel here. Okay. Now, we have a few different options for our choke. The first one's going to be kind of like a modified paper cutter. So I just need to grab any slack of the material on this side of his shoulder, and I'm just going to bite my elbow down to the floor here for my first submission. Let me get the tap. Okay. Most of the time I find he's going to defend this pretty hard, so we paired it with a second submission as well. So as I go for this second grip, usually he's going to block me by like grabbing my wrist here. I'm going to re-grab the fabric of the sleeve, and I'm going to use that to pull Nabil all the way up onto his side. Now, this grip is already very tight, so I'm getting the artery on the bottom side of his neck, but what's getting the choke on this side is actually his shoulder and bicep pressing into his neck here. And what's going to allow me to add pressure is actually just my chest on top of that arm. Okay, and then now once I get here, I'm just going to cover the back of his head. This I just used to kind of keep him on his side more than anything. It's not really helping me much with the choke. What's going to help is, again, just sprawling my weight that I just sprawl to get the tap. So it's not a lot of squeezing. I'm just using my bottom arm to hold that first lapel, and then actually the weight of my chest and me sprawling on his tricep is what's going to get the tap. So again, inside control, I'm going to lift his armpit, fingers in, and I use this to pull him towards me, turn his face. I take my time to slowly feed the lapel, no rush here, get as much slack out as I can, and I'm going to pass it underneath his arm to my left hand here. And again, even when I'm here, I can adjust, take more slack out. Now I have the ability to like lean a little bit more and turn him onto the side. Okay. Again, it really depends what he's doing with his right arm. If I feel like he's kind of snoozing here, then of course I can use this to kind of staple right off the bat. But if he's a little bit tighter to his chest here, then I'm probably gonna have to do my little knee on belly sequence. So I'll block his hip, knee on belly. My hand goes to the floor, so I'm not worried about him reversing me here, and then I can go briefly double knee on belly. But I'm not hanging out like trying to tap him with the double knee on belly. I'm just using it solely to staple his bicep to the floor. Once his biceps to the floor, I drop my knee back down. You could stay knee on belly, but I don't want to tempt him to like try and reloop this leg over my head here. So I actually like to come back down here, so I'm a little bit lower, harder for him to reloop that leg. And now I'm going to pass the grip back to my initial hand, but it's going to be a cross choke grip. So I go palm up, and I go in front of his chest here. Again, I have the luxury of control here that I can be a little bit taller with my chest to pass this grip off. I don't need to be like super tight here. You could, but I don't really need to. Palm up, my forearm's nice and tight to his neck. My first choking option is going to be grabbing any of the slack on the shoulder. You should feel there's a nice wrinkle on the lapel here. And then now I can just drop my elbow down to the floor for my first tap. As he goes to defend and blocks my hand here, I'm going to re-grip his sleeve. And I think this is the right reaction from him. He should obviously try to defend this choke, so it's very likely he'll block me here like this. Honestly too, when I go for this, I prefer the second choke, so I literally just like lift my hand, over exaggerate, come down so he blocks, re-grip the sleeve, pull him up onto his side, drop my chest, cover the head, sorry, yeah. And then I start sprawling for the tap. Okay, so I'm really kicking my legs back, all my weight should be on my chest, pushing that tricep and shoulder into his neck. And this can be done honestly from like knee cut or half guard too. If the lapel was free, I've seen it done a lot. Lucas Lepre likes this too. If I am here, I'm in tight, I can already start feeding this and starting using this to pass even. Okay, but I think it's safer to do from side control. So I feed the slack out, I pass the lapel to my cross-face arm, and again, I take as much slack out as I can, and I can use that to turn him onto his side a little bit more with my cross-face pressure. Again, look how I'm like leaning back and straightening my arm for cross-face. It's a little bit different than if I was just cupping him here and using more of my shoulder. I still have to stay tight with the shoulder. Versus the lapel, I can lean and extend my arm. Block the hip, knee on belly, use that to scrape his bicep down to the floor, and then one more trade-off. Passing it to my underhook hand in front of his chest for a cross-face or cross-choke grip. First choke, grab the slack, drop my elbow down to the floor. Second attack, he blocks. I re-grip the sleeve, pull him up onto his side, dropping my chest, covering the back, and sprawling for my tap. All right, let's try this, guys. 1, 2. Maybe I'll use you again, sorry. Okay, so we're gonna keep going with the same sequence. We're just gonna add in another choke now, and a couple different options of how we can finish this guy. Might be overkill, but it was off of a good question that someone had on Tuesday as well. So, and a couple similar questions here. So there's no rush through this whole sequence. Don't feel like everything has to be fast and quick pass off. Especially once I feed the first grip. The first grip will offer you so much control here that there's no need to rush. You might just use this to stabilize side control and disregard the rest of the details and chokes if you want to. But a common question was like, can I pass the lapel and knee on belly, or can I stay knee on belly? I think that's fine. We just have to be aware that the taller I am, the more likely he's gonna try and reloop this top leg in. Okay, so if I block the hip, also, I'd rather not even go knee on belly to begin with. If Nabil's arm was low and I could just get away with stapling like this, of course I'd rather do that, but most likely his hand is in tight here, okay? So I'm gonna block that hip, go knee on belly. You could start feeding the grip here, especially if I'm not too high up, but my only problem would be like he has two arms free, so I'd be worried about getting pushed off balance like actually this way. So if he does do something to like off balance me here, I just like to have this arm here, that's all. Okay, but now from here, scrape, drop the knee to the floor. Again, you could stay knee on belly to do your pass off if you want. What I'd be most concerned about is he's probably not going to push me away and hip escape. He's definitely not going to get this knee inside, but it's the reloop of this top leg. If he's really flexible coming here, this might be annoying, or if he gets the foot to my shoulder especially, he might be able to like push me away and create space. Exactly. So that would be my only concern, but you guys play with it. This is just how I do it. You'll build your own preference, your own little system on how you want to prioritize and set it up, okay? So once we get here, again, I like to go back down to my knee, and I'm kind of exaggerating how tall I am when I pass the lapel off, but ultimately I could keep my head to like Nabil's hip, and then I could slowly start to feed it this way too. I don't have to be tall. I just want to show you guys so I'm lifting up a little bit more. again, the biggest concern is always just going to be that reloop. I'm not really concerned about this knee coming inside. It's more this guy coming over the top. Okay, but again, you guys play around with it, see what you like. If you want to stay really tight here, I'd probably put my head to his hip. Then I can just slide my hand under, creating as little space as possible. Okay. Now we had our options of our choke. The same mechanics as a paper cutter. When I grab the slap, usually if my grip is like really deep, my elbow will go down to the floor and that'll get me the tap. I might not be tight enough, so if my grip's a little bit more shallow and my elbow goes all the way down to the floor and I still can't get the tap, then I'm gonna add like a flare in here too. And that just adds like a little extra power to your choke if your hand is too shallow. Okay. But for me, I like that Bravo choke, the second choke. So I'll go for this one, but it's mainly a bait. Usually when I'm here, I want him to grab this so I can pull him all the way up onto his side and start going here. Okay. We had a great question on Tuesday of if I go here and instead of him blocking my choke, he feels like nothing is really stopping him from sitting up and he tries to go for an underhook here and he sits up this way. Well, I have a really good handle now on this lapel. So I actually really like this choke as well. If he sits up, I grab the lapel, just feed my elbow, and now it's gonna be exactly like a cross choke. It's hard to get this cross choke when he's flat on his back because we're like perpendicular with each other. But when he sits up tight to me, he gives me a really good angle now for this. So if I feel him sit up, I can even honestly fall to my back, throw my leg over, and I just start to squeeze here for my tap. And it kind of feels almost like overkill, but it's a very strong choke with this lapel. Usually when we do our cross chokes, if it's not tight, your hands aren't deep enough in the collar. But having this just really connects my forearm to the artery. And then this grip, same thing. When he sits up to me again, it's just gonna be very, very tight here. So if he does sit up like this, I can just grab the lapel. You don't necessarily even have to fall back. I can start to go knee on belly, put my forehead to the floor, and finish in mount as well. But we have one last option, which is gonna be now basically a cross choke. I just wouldn't go for this right away because, again, he's flat. So in me leaning over, I'd be worried that he does off balance me a little bit this way. So I only really like to go for the cross choke variation. I feel like he gives me that reaction, right? So if I'm here and he does try and sit up, okay, now he pulled himself into a good angle for me so I can keep my head nice and tight. I'm gripping the same lapel now too. So I have my first cross choke grip, that same lapel. I just grab the slap, loop my elbow over. I could probably finish here. I could pull back and finish, or now I can go knee on belly. And even if I get reversed in this scramble and he like rolls me over, it's right back into my guard where I can just sit up and squeeze. So the grip should already be so tight that it doesn't really matter as much. Okay. So we'll practice the whole sequence again, but now we'll add in this third and last choke. All right, 1, 2.